Welcome to our presentation, Dietary Supplements and New Dietary Ingredients. What are they and how are they regulated? At MedLife Discoveries, our pipeline is focused on the development of pharmaceutical products that are capable of treating or mitigating plasmalogen deficiency-related conditions. We have always known that our compounds will have to go through the new drug approval route with regulatory agencies. That said, we frequently get asked about supplement approaches, so we thought that an overview on the rules around supplements and how they compare to those for drugs would be beneficial to our community. Before I start, I want to clarify that no one at MedLife is an expert in the dietary supplement regulatory space. This presentation is heavily based on publicly available regulatory guidances that require minimal interpretation. If you have any questions, we suggest that you reach out to a regulatory consultant with expertise in the dietary supplement space. In this video, we'll cover 5 key topics, beginning with some definitions so that we're all on the same page. Then I'll move on and discuss the FDA's new dietary ingredient, or NDI, pre-market notification program, focusing on when it's required and the types of information that need to be included. Then we'll shift focus to how these regulations relate to plasmalogen supplements, including an overview of available supplements and the level of plasmalogen and plasmalogen precursors that can be supported by dietary intake. Finally, we'll look at the differences between the oversight of the FDA and FTC within the supplement space, focusing on what claims can and cannot be made about both the safety and efficacy of supplements. So what is a dietary supplement? According to the FDA, dietary supplements are intended to add or supplement the diet and are different from conventional foods. The FDA goes on to say that generally, to the extent a product is intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent disease, it is a drug, even if it is labeled as a dietary supplement. I think I can safely say that we have all come in contact with dietary supplements on a regular basis. They include things like vitamins, minerals, amino acids, probiotics, etc. Unfortunately, we have also likely all come in contact with supplements that promise to treat some underlying health condition, such as preventing cancer or curing gastrointestinal issues, especially in the ever-increasing world of social media advertising. It is important to understand that regardless of the source of the supplement, it cannot legally make these claims, or else it would be required to follow the rules of a new drug product. But we will discuss this more later. Next, let's address the question, what are new dietary ingredients, and how are they different than other dietary ingredients? According to the FDA, a new dietary ingredient is one that was not marketed within the United States prior to October 15, 1994. What this means is that ingredients that were marketed before this date get grandfathered in and are free to keep being sold in the US without filing additional paperwork with the agency. However, if the ingredient is new or the form of the ingredient has changed, which we will discuss more in a minute, then the agency requires the manufacturer or the distributor of the product to submit a new dietary ingredient, or NDI, pre-market notification package. This package needs to be received by the FDA at least 75 days prior to the ingredient being introduced for sale. It is common to hear or read, especially from supplement manufacturers, that the FDA does not approve supplements or dietary ingredients. Although this is true, it does not negate the requirement to submit an application for an NDI, which they absolutely can object to. This objection would occur if, following their review of an application, they feel the data is insufficient to support the safe consumption of the ingredient. If they object, which they regularly do, the manufacturer and/or distributor will be notified that they cannot lawfully sell their product until the objections are resolved. If the agency has no objection, the product can start being sold at the end of the 75-day period. The FDA uses what are called guidance documents to publicly express their current thinking on regulatory matters for drugs, supplements, and medical devices. The agency issued a guidance document entitled Dietary Supplements, New Dietary Ingredient Notification and Related Issues, Guidance for Industry, which outlines the NDI regulatory requirements. It includes information on what qualifies as an NDI, what is considered chemically altered, which is important in the NDI determination process, when a notification is required, what information is required in a notification, can the ingredient safety be supported by a history of safe use, and if not, what safety information should be generated. The next set of slides will directly reference information from this guidance document, including screenshots of important information. Chemical alteration is a term frequently used in this guidance to determine if an ingredient's form has changed in such a way that it would make it an NDI. The FDA's rationale here is that processes that chemically alter the dietary ingredient from its natural source have the potential to affect the safety profile of the ingredient. Overall, any manufacturing changes that impact the chemical's nature, impurities, purity, or biological properties would qualify it as being chemically altered. In addition, using a novel source of the ingredient, for example, a switch from one type of plant or fruit to another, would constitute a change. If any of these changes occur, a pre-market NDI notification is required to allow the FDA the ability to review the overall safety profile of the new product. The agency goes on to provide some specific examples of processes that result in the chemical alteration of an ingredient. These include making or breaking bonds, removal of some portion of a mixture, such as filtration, extraction procedures to remove the ingredient from its source, higher temperatures used in the processing, or changes to the source or process of manufacturing. Based on these examples, it appears that the FDA's mindset on chemical alterations is that anything except the most minimal change is considered significant enough that they expect to see a pre-market notification. Synthetic dietary ingredients, particularly vitamins, are common, and clearly the agency is not objected to this process, provided the correct pathways are followed. They do provide clear guidance on their view on synthetic metabolites, which is quite strict. They indicate metabolites may be synthetically produced, provided that the starting material is a dietary ingredient and that the production process mimics the metabolic process in the body following ingestion. This is relevant as we believe that synthetic plasmalogens or plasmalogen precursors would fall under this definition, although a final decision on that would rest with the FDA itself. Now that we have an understanding of what is considered chemically altered, it is possible to review this table from the guidance that outlines when an NDI notification would be required. You will see that the only times a notification is not required is when the ingredient was marketed in the US before October 15, 1994, or when it was present in the food supply and has not been chemically altered. Anything else and the NDI notification should be submitted, and all standards for manufacturing and labeling apply to ensure the ingredient is not considered adulterated. Here is a high-level overview of the NDI pre-market notification process. Either the manufacturer or distributor of the product, and sometimes both, are obligated to file an NDI notification with the FDA at least 75 days prior to introducing the product to the market. The notification itself includes documentation on the manufacturer or distributor, information on how the product is manufactured and how this process is controlled for things such as purity. The agency also wants the label information, including the recommended dosage and if there are any populations that are to be targeted or excluded. For example, can the product be taken by women who are pregnant or breastfeeding? This is important as it will guide the safety information that they will expect to see in support of the product. An absolute requirement of dietary supplements, including new dietary ingredients, is that they are manufactured in compliance with a set of standards called the Current Good Manufacturing Practices. These GMP processes are very similar between drugs and supplements, although they do have some differences. In both cases, though, the regulators require that the manufacturer ensures the identity, purity, quality, strength, and composition of their ingredients and finished products. Further, the regulations have strict requirements to ensure proper sanitation practices, training of personnel, cleaning of equipment, and processes to ensure consistency of the manufacturing process and end products. If followed properly, these requirements are designed to ensure that the manufactured product is safe, meaning free from unwanted chemicals or bacterial contamination, etc., and that the consumer is getting the same product batch after batch. The biggest difference between drugs and supplements is the level of FDA oversight of the GMP processes. The FDA can, and occasionally does, audit facilities that manufacture supplements. Unfortunately, they don't have the resources to have a robust auditing process with supplements, and therefore these are commonly performed only as a reactionary measure to problems or safety issues being reported to the agency. By contrast, drug manufacturing facilities are routinely audited by the FDA, both during the clinical development and post-market stages. What this ultimately means to the consumer is that they have to trust that the manufacturer of a supplement fully understands the GMP regulations and is complying with them. That means that consumers need to consider their trust in the manufacturer of each supplement they are consuming. It's likely that the big supplement manufacturers, which commonly subscribe to oversight programs, are in line with the regulations, but small companies marketing niche products online may not know or be able to meet these stringent requirements. Outside of the manufacturing of the product, the FDA's major concern is the safety of the new dietary ingredient. The agency wants to see data that supports that the ingredient is, quote, reasonably expected to be safe under the labeled conditions of use. This is an important point, as the agency limits their review to only the level to be consumed as indicated on the label. If you are being instructed by the distributor or someone else to take more than the label indicates, the product may no longer meet the bar of reasonably expected to be safe. There are two ways that a manufacturer can support the safety of an ingredient. The first is called a history of use, which provides information that the ingredient has been safely consumed in ways that are comparable to the NDI's intended use. If this information isn't available, for reasons we will discuss in a minute, then the agency must rely on in vitro, animal, and human studies to demonstrate safety, much like it does for new drug products. Let's look at how the guidance document describes a history of safe use and when it can be used in an NDI notification to support safety. The agency says that a history of safe use can be substantiated by providing evidence that the ingredient was safely consumed as a food or dietary supplement, or as a component of a more complex mixture, for example calcium in milk, at levels equal to or higher than those that would be consumed by someone taking the NDI under the proposed conditions of use. This seems completely reasonable. If you want to say that something is safe because we have been consuming it in our diet, then the conditions must be comparable between the diet and the supplement. Now, if there are differences between how we consume an ingredient in our diet and how the supplement will be used, the FDA will likely require more safety data. Some examples of these differences are if the level in the supplement are higher. For example, if you were to receive 1 milligram a day from normal dietary consumption, but the supplement has 1,000 times that, which is commonly claimed on supplements, the FDA is going to want evidence that this higher dose is safe. Less common is if the route of administration is different. For example, if historically it was used topically and now the supplement is being taken orally, safety data supporting the new route of administration is required. Another common difference is in the duration of use. Let's say in your diet you were to eat something that contains a specific ingredient very sporadically, say no more than once a month, and the supplement is advising long-term daily dosing. This would be considered a different duration and also require safety data. The FDA also references other changes that impact the potential toxic effects, for example, a new manufacturing route or a shift from a natural to a synthetic source. Finally, they include that any differences that raise new safety concerns would warrant the generation of additional safety data. Again, we can use the example from earlier that if a supplement is intended for women who are pregnant or nursing, this may warrant additional data being provided. The FDA's guidance provides a lot of information on the types of safety data that they would be expecting to see to support a new dietary ingredient. Their guidance, when the ingredient does not have a history of safe use to support the safety, is similar to that for new drugs. Obviously, each supplement will be considered individually by the FDA, and they will consider factors such as how different are the intended doses, is the intended population particularly at risk, is the product designed for short-term or chronic use, etc. The guidance discusses a variety of different scenarios for NDIs and then suggests the safety studies based on these scenarios. Today's discussion is limited to those that involve long-term daily use, as this is likely to be of the greatest interest to our community. In the first scenario, the agency is considering an ingredient that is intended for daily chronic use and has a well-documented history of safe daily consumption. However, now the manufacturer has proposed an NDI intake that exceeds the historical consumption, and so additional safety data is required. For this scenario, the agency provides a long list of studies that they think would be necessary to assess safety. This includes 2 genotox studies that are generally test tube-based studies, as well as a 14-day study to look for the maximum tolerated dose, which would be done in an animal model. Following this study, they suggest a 90-day oral study in the animal model, and then a repeat dose study in humans, typically 30 to 90 days in duration. There are 2 options for looking at the longer-term safety, either a 1-year chronic toxicity study in animals or a 2-year carcinogenicity study in rodents. The last 2 items depend on the population that will be using the supplement, but the agency could also expect to see a 1-generation reproductive study and/or a teratology study. As you can see, when a history of safe use cannot be relied upon, the agency has high expectations for the studies that will need to be completed to confirm the safety of the ingredient, much like it requires for new drugs. Now let's look at the second scenario. This is again for an NDI, which is intended for long-term daily use, but this time the history of use cannot be relied upon for safety information. This could be for any of the reasons we discussed previously, including a change in the duration of use, the route of administration, or a new manufacturing or synthetic process. Something that makes it so the historical use does not match with the intended use, and therefore the potential for toxicity cannot be assessed. All of the same things are required as in the first scenario, but this time a 3rd genotox study would be required. The 14-day and 90-day study in animals are now needed in 2 species instead of just 1, with at least 1 of those not being a rodent. In addition, if required, the reproductive study would now need to be multi-generational. These additional studies show that the less information there is from the historical use of an ingredient, the more data the agency will need to see to satisfy its requirement of reasonably likely to be safe. Until now, we have been looking at the FDA guidance for any new ingredient. Within this community, plasmalogen supplements are of particular interest, and therefore I will now shift our attention to the status of these supplements. There are a number of plasmalogen supplements that are available online. In this slide is the information on the products that would ship to the US. Many of these are made overseas and therefore do not necessarily have to comply with the FDA regulations. There are 2 companies that we could find that manufacture and sell supplements within the US, Serogain and Prodrome. The majority of these supplements are extracts from dietary meat sources and provide a dose that is less than 1 milligram per day, although Neuroplast suggests up to 24 milligrams per day. The last 2 supplements in the list are fully synthetic, meaning they are made through a series of chemical reactions in a laboratory and are labeled as being 900 milligrams per mil, with a suggested dosing of up to 4 mils per day, which would be over 3.5 grams per day. Based on the FDA guidance, plasmalogen supplements based on extracts would be considered NDIs. It is unclear how the agency would consider a synthetic plasmalogen product. It would either be, at a minimum, an NDI, but more likely a drug, in which case it would require a conversation with the agency and a complete data safety package. The plasmalogen brand Serogain, for example, complied with the NDI requirements, and in 2019 they filed an NDI pre-market application and received a no objection letter from the FDA. Therefore, this product appears to be legally marketed and sold in the United States. We have not been able to locate information on NDI notifications for any other plasmalogen supplements, however. Looking at the concentrations of plasmalogens available in a variety of dietary sources that are frequently used in supplements can provide an idea of the levels of plasmalogens that could be supported by a history of safe use. In this slide, the levels of human breast milk are taken from a publication by Bo Haldren's group that has been referenced by others to support a high level of plasmalogen precursors in breast milk. The rest of the data on food levels shown here was generated in our own analytical lab. In all cases, we measured the levels in the raw product. It should be noted that cooking of any sort has been shown to reduce the levels of intact plasmalogens, so this is really the best case scenario. We see that there is less than about 20 milligrams per 100 grams, with the exception of raw pig brain, which is not commonly consumed and therefore could not be relied on in an NDI notification. Overall, this data confirms that the majority of the supplements at lower doses can likely support their safety with a history of dietary consumption, but high-dose supplements would almost certainly require additional safety data. So now that we understand a bit about what the notification and safety requirements are for supplements, let's look at what a manufacturer or distributor can actually say about a supplement. The FDA makes it extremely clear that a product sold as a dietary supplement cannot be represented either explicitly or implicitly to treat, prevent, or cure a disease. If the compound is capable of doing any of these things, it meets the definition of a drug and is subject to all regulations as a drug, including pre-market authorization. This means that if you see a supplement that is being marketed to you to treat, cure, prevent, or mitigate any disease, the advertiser is either using false advertising to make the sale, or they are actually selling what is called a misbranded drug. Both are illegal. It should be noted that there are some exceptions for things that qualify as structure function claims. These are things like calcium is important for bone health. These types of claims are allowed by the agency if there is sufficient data to support the claim and if the claim has been pre-approved by the agency prior to marketing. Within the US, there are two agencies that share joint responsibility for regulating dietary supplements, the FDA and the FTC. While their responsibilities overlap to some degree, they do focus on different areas. As we've discussed to this point, the FDA focuses on the manufacturing, labeling, safety reporting, audits of manufacturing facilities, and investigations of misbranded or adulterated products. The FTC, on the other hand, looks at how the product is being presented and sold to the consumer. As such, they focus on if the advertising is truthful and not misleading, as well as whether there is adequate and acceptable data to support any claims, whether they be direct or implied. Looking at the FTC regulations, we can see that they are clear that the marketer is responsible for all claims they make, even if they are just suggested or reasonably implied. This means that the marketer cannot suggest benefits or safety indirectly that they could not support directly. The FTC also considers the target audience, noting that consumers that are terminally ill, for example, may be more susceptible to miracle claims. As the FTC evaluates everything from the viewpoint of the consumer, they are concerned with the consumer's understanding of the ads, not just the marketer's intent, including what the net impression of a consumer would be when looking at all advertising material together, not just expressed claims. As the FTC's audience is the consumer, their guidances are much easier to understand, and they provide a number of examples or scenarios along with how the FTC would view the ads. For the purpose of this presentation, we have selected only a few of the examples, but if you want more information or examples, you should review the whole document. The first scenario that we are highlighting is an herbal supplement that makes unqualified claims that the product will treat diabetes, but the advertiser doesn't have adequate data to substantiate the claim. Therefore, the advertiser elects to add a disclaimer prominently on the ad that the claims have not been reviewed or approved by the FDA. While the disclaimer is helpful, it is not sufficient and does not negate the claims that the product treats diabetes. Therefore, the ad is considered deceptive. The FTC provides information on what would be considered adequate support for an advertiser to substantiate their claims. They make it clear that the FTC has a high standard when it comes to claims, particularly those that relate to an individual's health. They indicate that they require, quote, competent and reliable scientific evidence for all claims, and that this is generally in the form of randomized, controlled human clinical trials. They also point out that while in vitro and animal studies can be used to support claims, they are not sufficient and a human trial is required. They also state that anecdotal evidence and individual reviews are never sufficient to substantiate claims. Finally, an advertiser cannot rely on generalized public health recommendations to support specific claims of their product. Overall, this means that the agency expects solid human data from properly designed clinical trials to support any health claims. The FTC also looks at how the data was generated and whether it really supports the claim. They want to see that the trial or studies are done in a way that meets the expectations of the respective scientific community. They want to see that the studies were performed in a competent and reliable way and therefore yielded meaningful results. They also want to see that the results are fairly presented and that the advertiser doesn't only focus on the positive results when there are negative results as well. Obviously, they also want to see that the studies were done with the same product being marketed in the same manner in the same population. While the agency explicitly states these expectations, none of them are unreasonable and all are part of any well-conducted research program. This brings us to our next example from the FTC. Here, the marketer does not make any specific claims about their product, but they provide it to a blogger who goes on and writes that the supplement cures acid reflux and recommends the product to their readers. The marketer cannot support these claims, and therefore the marketer is liable for the misleading statements of the blogger. In addition, as the blogger is being paid to review the product, the post must include a clear and conspicuous disclosure for this arrangement. This last example addresses the FTC's thoughts around using separate media to make claims and sell products. In this case, a marketer provides a link to a book on their website, and the book makes claims that their product has medical benefits, ones that the marketer cannot support directly. The FTC is clear that the marketer is not relieved of their responsibilities simply because the book is 2 clicks away from the marketer's website. So that was our crash course on the regulations and safety requirements for dietary supplements. The key points are that the FDA requires a pre-market notification for any supplements that contain a new dietary ingredient. Further, a history of use can only support the safety of a dietary ingredient if there is little to no change in the source of the ingredient and the dose or daily intake of the ingredient is equal to or less than that which has been consumed historically. Finally, dietary supplements cannot make any claims that they treat, mitigate, prevent, or cure a disease or condition. This can only be claimed for approved drugs. Any claims that are made about a product are regulated by the FTC and must be supported by scientifically sound studies. It is never enough to use an expert's opinion, personal experiences, or animal and in vitro studies to support claims. Nor can a marketer simply direct the consumer to other sites or books that make claims that the marketer can't directly support. If you are being marketed a dietary supplement and have concerns, it can be reported directly to the FTC. If you have concerns about the safety of a product or that it may be a misbranded drug, these can be reported to the FDA. More information is available in the description below the video. In the end, you as the consumer are relying on the manufacturer and marketer of a dietary supplement to be honest, transparent, and follow all the regulations. Ultimately, you control what goes into your body. So if you have any doubt about a product, don't take it, at least until you have had the time to gather all the information you need to confidently say you trust the product. Thank you for your time, and we hope you found this overview helpful.